Awesome. Cool. It's nice to meet you all. My name's Ed, and Tom and I today will be talking kind of around the path to becoming a YC founding engineer, kind of some insights that we've found, some recommendations on what you guys can do right now. And then at the end, we can go through some kind of questions that you might have about kind of becoming founding engineer, or how we found kind of the process of transitioning to becoming YC founding engineers. So yeah, I'm Ed. I studied Masters in Computer Science at Warwick University. And then I joined a cybersecurity company called Netcraft for 2 years, where one of the projects I worked on was leading a UI platform unification, which was quite a big project. I kind of took the initiative to bring in some new technologies, kind of a full new stack for kind of front-end powered platform. And then about 8 months ago, I joined Asteroid as a founding engineer.
Cool, thanks, Ed. So yeah, I'm Tom. Nice to meet everyone. I took a slightly less conventional route than Ed, I suppose. So instead of going to university, I joined a company called WirelessLogic and started doing an internship with them. And over the 7 years I was there, I worked up kind of through the ranks, I suppose, and finished in a technical architect / lead engineer role. So we're doing things there in, you know, pretty high volumes of processing. So a good example of that is tracking usage for SIM cards. You know, we have millions of SIM cards across the globe, and we were doing tens of thousands of transactions a second, tracking the usage for those.
Yeah, and both Tom and I are now founding engineers at Asteroid, and kind of Asteroid works on browser automation, so automating back office tasks, for kind of small companies and large enterprises, or integrating kind of browser automation into new products, and kind of leveraging the big advancements that models have made recently, to basically automate as much as we can. So both Tom and I, yeah, we're founding engineers. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about how we landed our positions as being founding engineers, and kind of some advice around that. So to start off with, what we found really helped us was kind of being part of a strong startup community. This can be like formally, so like part of clubs or groups, or informally, like your friend groups, things like that. And kind of the key thing here that we kind of notice is that most startups aren't hiring publicly. They don't necessarily have a job posting out for like founding engineer roles. Most of the time they're hiring from people they know. So that's people they have full confidence in already. It might be kind of acquaintances or friends, but it's people who they have been in touch with maybe for a few years, and both see the kind of point in life where they're going to join them in kind of the startup role. And yeah, and like you kind of want to increase your chances as much as possible of kind of being in this group, and being part of Oxbridge-AIx is kind of gonna help with that, because you're going to be surrounded by like-minded people, and there's going to be people who you will talk to today that will end up founding really successful companies and will likely be wanting to hire founding engineers at some point. And like being involved with kind of the more higher successful startup group, like YC startups, is even better, because the likelihood of them succeeding is even higher. The interesting stat is about 6% of YC startups end up being worth $1 billion. So if they're going to be worth a lot more, it's more likely that they're going to be able to like hire you as a founding engineer. And like you're going to end up having a better experience at that company if they end up being more successful, right? So yeah, like definitely a core part of like putting yourself in the right position is to be part of a community of founders, and other like entrepreneurial people. Tom's going to talk a bit through now the skills involved.
Yeah, I suppose just quickly on the community side before moving on to the skills, one of the other things I suppose you get with YC is that community out the box. they do give you a massive amount of help in terms of connecting you with people, connecting you with investors, that kind of thing. I suppose one other benefit as well is many people know the YC logo and know who YC is. So I think it gives you a bit of a credibility boost when you kind of start off with that, I suppose, which I think has probably helped us in our journey. So yeah, a bit onto the skill set. Obviously, you somewhat need to know what you're doing, but to dive a bit deeper into that, when you join a large company, you can join as someone pretty intelligent with not a huge amount of practical experience, and that's great. You will level up very quickly and do very well. But unlike a large company, when you join a startup, they do not have the resources to be able to train you and make you better. And so you kind of, well, whilst you do learn, and for me as an engineer, I'm learning a lot commercially, for example. I would not have landed the role that I'm in had I not had previous experience building systems. Not to say that experience has to come from a larger company. It can come from your own projects and hacking away at things in your own time. But you do kind of need to know that knowledge. I suppose for people always say you don't need to, how best put it, that make nice code in a startup, and that's certainly true, especially at the early stages. I think you're trying to clobber stuff together and you're changing every 5 minutes. But when you're starting to prepare for scale, you do need to know about these things. So things like containerization, messaging systems, Kubernetes, experience with kind of large scale systems should somewhat be second nature. I guess the way I'm thinking of it is circa 80% of the stuff that we work on, we somewhat know what we're doing or have a pretty good idea of what we're doing. The other 20% is basically revolutionary enough to the point where we're inventing as we go along. And I suppose that 20% is where kind of our real value comes, and your value as a company comes. So yeah, I suppose a bit more on that into kind of how do you prove that skill set. Again, for me, a bit different, kind of having 7 years experience elsewhere was quite useful. I also personally did know the co-founder CTO Joe of Asteroid prior to working here, and we did a lot of hackathons and side projects together, and so I suppose I kind of got in a bit of a weird route, but all those hackathons and side projects proved to him that I could have, or that I knew what I was doing enough, even if they were never meant as a job interview, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. One interesting point here is that Tom and I are fortunate enough that we did work at a kind of established companies prior to joining Asteroid. So we had an opportunity to, like, at university, you don't tend to learn kind of the full scale deployment kind of methodologies and like Kubernetes, Terraform, all this stuff. You tend to learn those on the job from other engineers as part of like a big team. So we did have that advantage. Some founders will kind of set that as a requirement. It depends on the kind of what the startup is doing. So if it's more of like a research startup, that's less of a concern. Whereas if it's kind of a product-based startup, they're going to want to scale, and especially if it's kind of fully software-based scalability, you need to have that kind of knowledge that like we got from our early careers in like a bigger company. So yeah, and kind of onto the kind of lifestyle choices. What we notice is you're definitely it's definitely important that the way you are as a person impacts kind of what startups you can go to. So like the stereotype of like you don't just work a 9 to 5 at startup is completely true. Founders can't risk getting someone who's really just wants a comfortable life. You've got to kind of live and breathe building the product, and kind of be able to fully commit to making it most of your life is about working for the startup, especially as a founding engineer. You're joining the team so early. And also, like, what I think is kind of glossed over a lot is the compatibility. You are going to be in like working with these people potentially 7 days a week, potentially up to like 12 to 14 hours a day in some cases. You really need to be very compatible. And that just means you want to put yourself forward for founding positions where you genuinely will feel compatible. Tom and I kind of got this via, we kind of contracted at Asteroid before we joined full time. And we quickly realized that kind of the vibe was there. We got on well with kind of the rest of the team, which at that point was just the two founders. So like, it's very important. It's such a close-knit team, early stage, that it's really important that you make sure that the compatibility is there. So kind of how did we, Tom and I, kind of apply this in practice? So I met Joe, who's the co-founder of Asteroid, through Warwick AI, which is Warwick University's AI society. And early on, I wanted to kind of impress all the other people around that society, because I knew there might be people in this society who end up building companies in the future. And it'd be good if they see me as a reliable person who can actually like get stuff done. And yeah, so I met Joe through that, and the same with Oxbridge-AIx. With the projects you're working on, similar vibe where you can like really impress the people around you who are probably the most likely people you can very easily kind of touch base with right now, who will end up becoming founders or other founding engineers. And Tom touched on this a bit, like hackathons, kind of on the skill-based thing, getting as many iterations of you building a product, as like silly as it might be, as like actually not like useful as it might be, but like having an idea and then scale, like building it from nothing to a full deployed project that anyone can go to. The more times you do this, the more you prove to yourself kind of the knowledge of building full products. You prove to yourself that you can do that, but also prove to people around you is really important.
Sure. Do we want to maybe touch on the fact that, having said it's a lot of hard work, it's massively rewarding. And so yeah, if you're wondering why work 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, that's why it's hugely rewarding. You get to steer the ship, and yeah, it's great.
Cool. So now I thought it'd be interesting, kind of, but imagine you've landed your kind of founding engineer role at a company, to kind of touch on what a traditional day is at a startup, for me anyway, and Tom. So this is kind of fairly similar to what I would do on a regular basis. In fact, this is very close to what I did today. So like, what you'll find is when you arrive at work, you're basically having to, even as a founding engineer, especially if you're the first one online, you have to basically take in the whole entire company, all the activities, and make sure there's nothing immediate that needs to be actioned. For example, this morning, AWS went down. So we had to make sure that there wasn't any like issues to do with that. Luckily, we don't use AWS, so we didn't really have any immediate problems. But also things like, even as a founding engineer, you're checking any customer queries. So we had a few messages in Slack come through as well this morning. And it's about being proactive even as an engineer, to respond to those, because you're trying to like, what our customers really like, having kind of that touch base with actual engineers, and also just improvements to the response time. So then obviously you start your engineering. What happened today was I did some engineering work, and then I got a customer query through about something that we built for them. And again, it's about prioritizing what matters for the company at that time. Both Tom and I will regularly have to drop like kind of the exciting engineering projects we're working on, to maybe build an agent for a customer, or fix a bug. And it might not even be like customer, it might not even be a request from a customer, it might be internally. Joe or David, the two co-founders, or someone else on the team might be like, there's this terrible problem, this terrible bug, you just need to drop what you're doing, and be able to like be happy to be kind of malleable with moving between projects. I don't know if Tom, you've got anything to add there.
I wouldn't say a huge amount, to be honest. Yeah, it's malleable is probably the correct term for it. So sometimes we get head down, other times you're all over the shop. I'd be lying if I said this afternoon wasn't completely all over the shop. So
And
yeah.
I think that's like it's also like a kind of a huge positive of being in the startup is that it's quite exciting. It's kind of like a hackathon all the time with a bit more structure, and like you've actually got a product, like you've got something on the line, which is your product succeeding. So then, yeah, I won't go through in detail, but like you get through the day, you carry on doing maybe to carry on the bug fix, meet up with the team. You kind of, even though startups, you can still be quite structured. So knowing like how to structure meetings well and like make them efficient, roadmap a suitable length of time in advance so that you can actually have like a goal. So like kind of this like goal of maybe in the month you want to reach this number or this number, and then week by week and then day by day, how can you progress towards that? Because at the end of the day, you're still like, you've got this kind of plan in the background, even with bugs coming up, customer queries, you can still work towards this goal. And it's kind of quite good to have a united kind of view as a team on getting to that kind of goal for the month or that goal for the quarter. What I would say is coming from a larger company, like we would do quarterly roadmaps in our teams, which still felt like quite a short amount of time to get things done. Whereas like at Asteroid, 1 week you might think one thing's the goal, whereas the next week something else is the goal, or you've realized something in that week that you kind of need to like slot a new sub goal in, which is to maybe a quick win that you can do, or some feature that you thought works well but didn't actually work very well. So I think showing as a somebody who's potentially going to be a founding engineer that you can kind of be flexible and you're keen to basically just prioritize whatever the priorities of the company is at that time is really important. Cool. Tom, unless you've got anything else to say, I'll move on to kind of the next slide.
Yeah, no. Let's move on to the next one.
Cool.
Can I say it? Yes, there we go. So staying valuable and relevant. Yeah, I think this is a big problem in tech. I've personally found oftentimes the second I learn how to do something, it's outdated. And I suppose over the years, I've somewhat found paths to try and mitigate that. I think there's a world where how best to put this? If you are not at the forefront of technology, it's very, very difficult to stay relevant. And you see it in businesses all the time who kind of will have built something and scaled up and then just lag in effect, and people can move quicker, and ultimately they start losing market share and it all goes wrong. And so I think one of the main things you can do to combat that as an engineer is stay up to date with technology and bring the ideas and things that you learn forward. So typically for us, we're always researching things outside of work. Good ways to do that, I suppose, are YouTube. I think that both Ed and myself watch a lot of YouTube when we're not working, which I'm sure our girlfriends don't particularly like, but there we go. But yeah, so lots of YouTube, lots of reading. Articles are great. Like I'm sure a lot of people here have a Medium subscription, but yeah, Medium I really enjoy. And also, if you want to know deep stuff, reading books about software, I've found incredible fonts of knowledge. Granted, are they the most up-to-date thing in the world? No, because a book takes a while to read, or sorry, to write, and to read, I suppose. But you get a much deeper understanding of a concept or a problem from a book. So, but when you combine all these things together, articles, books, YouTube, yeah, it helps keep you at the forefront, and you can bring that knowledge you've learned in your own time into work and make sure that the company stays completely at the front of what they're doing. So yeah, if I was going to have a suggestion, it would be that. I don't think, or it's rare that you will just get time to learn stuff when you're at work, unless you have a particular problem in front of you. But I know some of our best ideas, for example, have come from Ed going away and reading an article, and then before you know it, the next week we're doing something completely different. So yeah, I think you certainly have to be kind of personally invested in that learning, especially when you're in the startup world.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the key thing here is you are the core engineering team. Your role, the name of your role is founding engineer. So if you're not gonna bring these big advancements to the company that might change how things work for the better or might improve performance or whatever, who else is going to? And I think it generally shows like this isn't just about like you enjoying your job. It's also about keeping proving to the company that you are like a core part of the team, and you're trying to like spur on the team to be excited. And nothing's better than every day or so coming in and be like, yeah, guys, here's a YouTube video I watched. This is really cool. I think we should adopt this, or even if it's like a negative thing where you're kind of like you've found a competitor, and they're doing something interesting. You might be like, do we kind of follow what they're doing because it seems to be working? It generally like you're kind of trying to get as many sources of information into making your products the best it can be. And that kind of leads into like the commercial side of this. So even as a founding engineer, Tom and I find that we do a lot of like commercial activities. And what we've kind of learned at the time is we need to be able to like really like the product and the customer. The getting learnings from the customer will directly impact what you choose to engineer on. When we do our like weekly planning meetings, we're like going through what are the issues that the customers are having, and kind of taking that role and the kind of ambition to talk to customers, kind of take maybe slightly sales role or a solutions engineering role as well. Tom and I both have customers that we are the main contact point for. So we're kind of getting daily findings. Like it's very easy to kind of think in your mind, I'm an engineer, there's this like line, a kind of barrier. I just do engineering because I'm the founding engineer, right? And then kind of maybe the CEO and the go-to-market and the sales team on the other side. But actually the lines are very blurred, and you're hired because you can kind of adapt. And you might find there's been some days with Tom and I where we've purely been doing kind of customer-related activities instead of actually engineering. And you've got to be kind of willing to do that. And kind of your role within the company will change over time as well. Because you're joining as a founding engineer very early on, it's likely that you will see the greatest shift in the company out of everyone. So that means that you might start off as founding engineer, then you might take more of a leadership role, or you might go into more of the solutions engineering role. And being open and kind of prioritizing what's best for the company is very appealing. You don't want to kind of feel like you're just forcing yourself to do certain type of work because that's kind of what you originally hired for. You have to be quite adaptable.
Yeah, so I suppose I'd maybe add, or I've got a bit of an anecdote on the commercial side. So my previous employer, well, in fact, let me explain why I've got this anecdote. Oftentimes people have this view that as a company grows, they slow down, and people often see that as the kind of default, if you like. And so this anecdote's about why that doesn't have to happen. So my previous employer, WirelessLogic, when I started, we were working very slowly. We weren't releasing features quickly. We weren't releasing features that were used by customers, and that sort of barrier between engineering and the engineering teams and the customers was always kind of there. Then, I don't know, a couple of years ago, we got some new management in, and we started working towards something known as the product operating model. This is really well documented, and the books about it are great, by a company or organization, I suppose, called Silicon Valley Product Group. And they talk about how at a large scale, as a large scale company, you can work a lot more similarly to a startup and still iterate really quickly and get stuff out. And it completely revolutionized the way the company was working. It was fantastic for both engineers and product people. And so if anyone's ever at a stage where they are, in a startup that is growing, I definitely suggest reading this stuff. Don't let middle management, if you like, kind of try and tell you what to do based on their assumptions, because a lot of what is in this material is very kind of anti-intuition, if you like. So yeah, there you go. Book recommendation for everyone. Cool. Is there anything
Awesome.
you wanted to add commercially, Ed? That's all.
I think to just expand on what you were saying there, like there's no reason, especially when the startup evolves, that you also might want to bring kind of process changes to the table, right? It doesn't have to be, obviously early stage, it's all kind of, there's a lot going on, there's not much structure because you're still trying to find your feet. But what we're finding now at Asteroid is kind of you need to have kind of the mindset of being, okay, now is probably the correct time to kind of introduce more structure, because you're kind of having this more predictable path of like releasing features, getting new customers, that kind of thing. So kind of touching on what you were saying, Tom, like you can't be afraid to kind of get involved as a founding engineer in kind of shaping how you're going to go about processes at the company. Maybe bringing in experience from previous companies if you've been at like kind of a big tech company before, or even just like things you've read. And kind of on the next kind of point is this kind of this be the problem solver. Nothing's more important than someone joining the team, and I've had it at a previous company before, where kind of somebody will join the team and they'll just you'll give them a task, and then they'll kind of just start whittling off all the bugs or the issues they found, or like, oh, why do we do it this way? It's much nicer to you can bring up issues, bring up bugs, but bring in a potential solution suggestions to the table along with them is much more appealing, and just fixing the problem, especially if it's like kind of one that's fairly isolated, is even more appealing. At a startup, especially early stages, there's not a lot of free time going around, so it's most likely that you're just the best to just fix that in the moment, especially if it's some like bug or kind of a stupid way of doing things, and then no reason not to share with the rest of the team what you did, but like what I find is it's so nice, just people, especially at Asteroid, we have people who just like fixing problems, rather than just sharing problems. It's like a kind of a way of spinning the vibe as well, so it's much more positive. And kind of the other thing here as well is that you, being a founding engineer at a company, you are hired because the founders and the rest of the team want people who they can listen to and people to suggest ideas. You don't want to, sometimes it can be easy just to kind of like ignore things that might come up. So like ignore competitors that might be an issue, ignore kind of regressions in things or gaps that you could like kind of pivot into. But that's just going to lead to an early stage startup just not progressing, or potentially just not working out in the end. So you are, part of your role as a founding engineer is to be confident to speak up, and to raise any issues or any new ideas. And it can be also quite like motivating, because you've got these people around you who are kind of throwing out ideas, and not being too protective over ideas as well is a big thing. You've all got the same goal, and like being a person who's willing to share ideas is really, really appealing. Do you have anything else to add there, Tom?
Yeah, I'd maybe just say, on your thing of feeling like you can talk, or ensuring that you, how best to put it, bring your ideas and what you're thinking to the team. One of the best quotes I've ever seen for this is really simple: is that have strong opinions loosely held. I think it has always resonated with me. I saw it on a job advert years ago, but that to me is the perfect mindset to have in software. You want someone to have an opinion, but you don't want them to be so married to it, that they, are kind of blinded and tunnel visioned by it. So yeah, if that's probably, to me, when I've been employing people, especially, the key somewhat in personality.
Cool. So that's about 30 minutes. So I think we can move on to a bit of a Q&A now. I'm gonna stop screen sharing because I want to be able to see the chat. But yeah, if anyone has any questions on kind of the pathway of becoming a founding engineer, or what it's like being a founding engineer, anything about like specifically working for Asteroid, or specifically a YC based, what's different with kind of a YC based startup, go ahead.
So, I mean, I'm gonna get it started if that's okay with you guys. So I think there's a question which a lot of people, especially at universities, they get confused by, because everyone's very anxious about their future, right? And this opportunity of talking to you guys is very much in line. It's like you guys are in many ways doing what so many people want to be doing, and you're part of something that either people want to be building or be part of building. So that question is, does someone need to do a master's or PhD to be a great developer?
Well, I'll let Tom answer this because he's the perfect example for this.
I'm very biased, and I know Tom is going to say exactly what I'm hoping he'll say. But yeah.
Oh, that's a. I don't actually think I have a really simple answer. I think, do they need to do a master's and a PhD? Probably not. Do the fundamentals that you learn help? For sure. I mean, I've been fine. I've been lucky. I'm sure if you sat Ed and I in front of a comp sci exam paper and put us kind of head to head, I would be left for complete dust. But yeah, we are in the same job role at the same company. I'm sure Ed had a lot more fun experiences at uni, but yeah, it's gone okay for me, I suppose. I'm not. I don't have any complaints. So no, do you have to? Absolutely not. Does it help a bit? Probably.
I think what I found was it was a forced way of networking if you weren't like closed off. Like I was fortunate that Netcraft was quite a young, like most of the people who worked at Netcraft were quite young. But I know other people in other tech jobs you join, and like you're the youngest person, the next youngest person is 30, and they're not really. They're often like comfortable. They've got kids, they've got families, so they're not kind of your entrepreneurial type of people. Whereas at uni, you're all in the same boat, and especially like more of the top unis in the UK, like Warwick, like Oxford and Cambridge. There's a lot of like ambitious people, and almost being at uni, even just for the networking side of things, there were a lot of at Warwick, we had some like enterprise clubs and funds and grants, and like you just had that right at your fingertips. And I don't think I would have been as I don't think I would have found it as like more, what's the word, approachable of an idea to join a startup if I hadn't gone to uni. I just kind of always assumed that I'd kind of work for big tech. Like my goal before was I'd work for big tech company like Google, like Amazon, something like that. Whereas after uni, I was kind of like, actually, to have more of an impact, I could actually join a startup. That's genuinely something that you could do.
If I can ask, so we have questions from Tom and others coming in. Guys, whoever wants to ask a question, just raise your hand. Please introduce yourself, so that everyone gets to know you. We can build trust that way, and that way, there's more spreading, right? As Ed and Tom have been talking. But one follow-up question on what you've said, and then it sounds like we've got 4 questions waiting for you guys. If you reflect, what is the period of your time where you learned more about developing and coding and writing code? Which time of your life was that?
How do you mean which time of life? Like, is that to Ed who did go to uni versus?
Well, it doesn't have to be, So for example, my CTO, he liked his undergrad because it was very focused on practical applications versus theoretical, but he's been thrown into so many different, building different things, and you know, he's got that attitude that you two have, where you guys really go for it, you know, problem solving. And he might get stuck on something in a weekend, but in order to fix it, he'll end up learning quite a bit of different things. And then, you know, the volume of coding he does as a consequence is also in itself like quite powerful. So that's, you know, that's like an example, right, for him. I have other people who have done PhDs at Oxford who really like you know, they just went down a rabbit hole for like a whole year. So just did a lot of writing code as part of that, you know. So it's just, I'm just curious about the two of you.
So
Yeah, I think. Oh, Tom, you can go first.
No, go on. Go on.
Okay, I think for me, yeah, like uni didn't teach the core part of uni, so like your core modules and stuff like that didn't really teach me much about software engineering. They taught you a lot about like algorithms, stuff like that, but I think earlier on I started getting like building up most of my knowledge on like coding, on like full stack development, infra, all that kind of stuff, more in just like side projects. So I always had a side project at uni. Then I had like hackathons I would do. I had kind of an attempt at a little startup at uni. And then I got involved with Warwick AI, and I was the head of engineering at Warwick AI. So I was like teaching software engineering courses for like kind of projects and startups that were starting up in this society. So I think my start of my like actual software development knowledge for that's actually more useful in practice was at uni, but fully extracurricular. And then after I joined Netcraft, I kind of relearned the correct ways of doing this for a full scale product or multiple products, and like inter-service communication. I learned all that at Netcraft. So yeah, I think it was a mixture. But I think it's the classic thing that everyone says, like you learn it on the job. You don't really need to learn every language in the world, because you'll just learn it on the job. And there's an element of that with startups, but I think Tom and I will both say that having that knowledge before joining Asteroid, because it was such an early stage company, having that knowledge before Asteroid is what made us appealing. Like the co-founders knew that we were going to be able to just come in and start building and start shipping. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd maybe add a slightly higher level, which is I think I've learned most working on A, new problems, and B, with people who are just as passionate about them. It's so nice working together and learning about something, or being like, oh, look at this thing I did, or, oh, look at that thing. And also when you do it that way, you're able to bounce ideas off people. So whilst in the talk I did say a lot about kind of self-reading and reading articles and watching YouTube videos, the other side to that is coming into the office and speaking about them. And when you have those ideas validated, I think for me that's been the most kind of leveling up learning.
Next, Tom, because you put yours in the chat first, and then we'll go to Tanishi, then Adam.
Yes, thank you, Uday. Well, I put a question in the chat as well, but I'd actually kind of like to switch my question. Ed, you said that you started a startup, or you tried. I was wondering why you are now a founding engineer as opposed to starting your own startup, and what was in that decision?
Yeah, so I attempted like kind of it was a side project that kind of spun into potentially something more at uni. And we got like a grant from the uni, not that significant, but like kind of was like, oh, cool, okay, people are willing to kind of throw money your way to solve problems. But then that, as the uni got busier towards the end, like final year with my final year project and stuff, that kind of fizzled out. I think the other people who were on that weren't as ambitious as me, and I was more just doing the engineering side, and they more wanted to take up the role of like the kind of selling of it, and they just didn't really put as much time in. I kind of felt like it just fizzled out. But then I think from like, let's say go back a year when I first heard that there was a potential role at Asteroid, and why didn't I go, actually, why don't I just start my own company? I think I'd known Joe at that point, the co-founder, for about 4 years. And I knew that like he was always probably going to go and start his own company. And it's like, if there wasn't anyone at the time who I felt, any team that I could go into where I felt comfortable that we would succeed and I could have my say and get properly involved, I probably would have gone, a year later, I probably would have gone, right, I'm fed up of this kind of 9 to 5. I want to do my own thing with a start company. But it was more out of convenience. I knew I could get the same out of Asteroid as it would be to become a founding engineer. And obviously as well, when you're a founding engineer, you usually have a bit more of a predictable what's the word? Well, you get a salary, right? Whereas if you found a company, you usually have to kind of handle all that. So that is also a big appeal. It means that you can kind of do the fun, but have a bit of a more stable, predictable, at least for the short term, right? Whereas if you're founding a company, you kind of have to drop everything and you don't really know where your life's going to go.
You also get to be more focused, right?
Yes, yeah. So like Tom and I can basically focus on being engineers plus like the other roles that come within that. We don't have to worry too much on like the really, really high level. The business has already got some money. So you might not be fundraising, you're not really going to get involved in like too much fundraising stuff. A lot of the more complicated things around like starting a company have already happened. Whereas we could join within the first day of joining, we were already building features. There wasn't like, what problem are we going to solve here? It was more like, how can we like contribute to this product? And I think that's like something quite important, is that Tom and I were genuinely like really interested in what Asteroid builds. We didn't necessarily think what they built was perfect already. We joined because we thought we could have a significant difference. And I think it's a lot easier to see an existing thing and then go, how can I make an impact on this? Whereas if you like decide you want to start a company, you might have an idea, but it's like, there's not really anything tangible already there. So it's quite difficult to go through the steps in your mind of how do you get to this end goal.
Thank you.
Tom, we can ask you a second question after we give the others a chance. Is that okay? Cool. Tanishi?
Hi, thank you so much for being here today and talking to us. I really did learn a lot. So I'm going to put myself in a bit of a vulnerable position here. Basically, for the last, I'm doing my master's in computer science, and for all of my undergrad, I did some of the things that you guys mentioned for us to do, like just build a damn thing, right? As they say. I did that 3 to 4 times with different types of products, all of them related to health tech, meaning my knowledge in health tech grew exponentially. So did my confidence that I'd be able to build in that space, and my connections list was very health tech geared. Now, over the past summer, I actually did put up a startup, and then we got through 2 accelerators, and I took a step back and I said, you know what, I actually think I'm interested in something else now, and that something else is almost a 180 from what I've been doing for the last 4 years. It's in finance, and there's this one idea that I'm very passionate about. The issue is, again, lack of connections, lack of knowledge in that area, etc. Like, it's literally me venturing into the wilderness versus me being in my comfort zone. Given that, as Uday mentioned, for example, with masters, you only have a year's worth of time. Given that I'm at this crossroads, would you suggest for me to build something around health tech, and once it matures, then on the side explore this finance related passion of mine, or B, would you say just go for it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I think the fact that you got opportunities within accelerator is quite good. I've not got much experience with actually like founding a company. What I will say is that you'll be surprised by how many people pivot. So even if you've gone into an accelerator and you're working on something in medtech, like so many companies will pivot even to a completely different domain, even within accelerators. At the end of the day, the accelerators want your company to be successful, and they don't want to make you work on something that you're not passionate about. I think it's a bit different because you've already like decided that maybe you're not so passionate about the original idea anymore. But yeah, I'm not really sure if there's much more advice I'd give other than like, is it more you're wondering like, should you go back to doing this medtech idea, go on to the accelerators, or is that what you're asking, that, or to start fresh with this kind of new idea?
I mean, I am starting fresh with another health tech idea, but it's about, should I keep being in the safety of, oh, I have contacts in this space or I've done things in this space, versus should I go into something that's completely new at this sort of pivotal point in my life and try to build things from the ground up?
So I'd say the second option. The reason there is like you're in a master's, so it's not like you're relying on this to work out. You've got a bit of time.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you want to be working on a product that you can pour your life and soul into. And if you're constantly thinking there's this other thing that I think might be better or is more interesting, you're never going to be able to fully focus on what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be held responsible for any advice I give. So
No. I promise you I'm not going to hold you at gunpoint and be like, that's what you told me and that's what I did. Why didn't, yeah.
I would add slightly more philosophically, you only regret the things you don't do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if there's another thing dragging you away, it seems like a good option.
Would you guys mind if I chime in? Yeah.
Of course.
So, you know, I don't know if you'd find this as a potential middle ground, but one thing you could potentially do is create a fintech product for the healthcare space. Because it's a huge issue. It's actually the biggest problem in healthcare is affordability and access, right? And so there's so many different, just depends on what kind of fintech product you wanted to make. And in regards to, so as someone who started their career in medtech and was like at the, you know, when India was going through this life science super craze, it was like the industry. I had all these connections. Those connections don't go away. They become relevant, become useful. People change careers, you know, but I completely wholeheartedly agree with Ed and Tom that you have to do something that really speaks for your heart. And if you have such a big safety net being at uni right now that you know, might as well focus on trying to learn new things. And then when you you know, when you take that next step, what's fantastic is you've already understood that you can really believe in yourself, have that confidence in yourself from the experience you've had. So, you know, nothing's really not possible.
Right. Thank you.
Adam?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So given that each individual can now, due to AI, have a lot more coding output, or the ability to do a lot more projects is increased, how has the expectation for someone's individual projects changed? And in that era, what kind of set of experiences to pursue is the wisest or comes off as the most compelling? That's quite broad. So I'll just say for myself, I feel like I always have a lot of ideas and a lot of projects I want to work on. So I could just have a lot of smaller projects, you know, stack them, learn a lot and leave them. But also there's the argument that, you know, stay committed to one or two proper big projects that are more resembling solo startups and always be iterating, trying to grow revenue. Of course, your time is spent not necessarily all the time doing coding, but doing all the other business functions. So in terms of being a founding engineer or contributing to that sort of team in the future, what is the best sort of approach? Like, how do you see depth versus breadth and coding versus business building in a technical area, if that makes sense?
So from the kind of like how much effort should you put into one thing, kind of the approach. So even at like Asteroid, where we're working on a working product, it goes hand in hand with like starting fresh with new products. You want to kind of get to a point where you get an output or something resembling a rough, maybe it's a proof of concept, or kind of iteratively releasing things like feature. In our case, it'd be features as often as possible. Nothing's worse than like if we say at Asteroid committed to a 4-week-long new feature, did it from start to end as one big chunk of work, and you took up one engineer's time, and then you realize at the end it either doesn't work well, or there was like you were too late for the customer didn't see any progression or whatever. It just doesn't work very well. How we structure our tasks at Asteroid, which we found works quite well, is that if we've got this, we might have a big project, but we try and segment it up such that we can release something every couple of days towards that project, whether it's just to test internally or whether it's like a portion of the feature that we can release to customers. And you kind of get this, the phrase fail first, right? It's kind of the same way. If you get to an output, you'll often see immediately if that output's failed, and if you need to now pivot a direction in the implementation, or maybe it's not needed anymore, at least at that point, you've not poured in so much time. And I think the same applies for trying to make things stick. If you're trying to come up with a product or kind of try out new ideas, is just get them out quick, like get a minimal version working. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Can I ask a brief follow-up, if that's okay? Yeah. The argument is sort of, you can release a lot of things and test them out and see if they go, but obviously getting to product market fit requires trying the same project in, let's say, different ways, or then talking to customers and then taking the same thing and pushing it through a maze. And it is hard, obviously, because I'm still at university, knowing when it's time to keep going across and trying to do that versus when it's time to, okay, this hasn't initially taken off, and then do I find another project, or do I just keep going with this in a different direction? If that sort of makes sense.
It makes sense. So I'm not sure I would even feel equipped to answer that, other than from what Asteroid have done. I don't know if you do.
Well, like I think the key thing here is that it touches on a question that was just asked before this, is that you need to actually believe in it. So if you have a belief that there's a better way of doing something than what you've got, go ahead and do that, right? But if you believe like you've got the optimal solution, and now you need to start like talking to people about whether it's actually like something useful. If you've got the belief behind that, you're going to make it work, even if it means pivoting whilst you're working on that idea. I think what people often see is kind of a startup trying to form, or you're trying to come up with an idea as like you've got this kind of point here, and then you're trying loads of different things. Whereas what you can actually do is kind of try one thing, and then when you get here, you more look at that solution problem and the solution, and then you go and you keep on going kind of down this tree. So you're kind of depth first, but at each stage you're looking like you're retrospectively looking at what you've done. If you spoke to some people and be like, okay, can I kind of modify this into a better idea? Sometimes you will just have to fully reset, right? But that's kind of the same way we operate, even with just looking at kind of from building out new features, right? Is kind of at every point and analyze, is this still what we should be working on? And I think the same applies when you're trying to start a company or kind of trying to find a good product.
Okay.
Is that, yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, finish off your thought.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, at Asteroid, we're in probably a pretty unique position of not being really in a particular vertical yet. I think a lot of what we've read and get told is that that's probably actually quite a dangerous place to be, maybe, because we don't have a particular industry. But yeah, so we haven't really even verticalized our product, which is, I think, different to what a lot of people are doing.
You guys mind if I add in to this?
Of course.
Yeah. So I mean, I really concur. There's just a different, I guess, perspective of elaborating what you're saying. On one side, I'm going to start with what you just said, Tom, right? If starting broad is quite powerful, but it's difficult because not because if it's a good or bad real reason, right? VCs on one side are trying to box you, and they're trying to manage and understand your risk, right? They're trying to understand you. The problem with being broad is fewer people understand you. And I've learned this the hard way, where we were very broad with Tookie, and now we've just focused on a use case at a time. It's the same technology, right? And you build one use case and you can use it for the other one, That's more on that side. In regards to, Adam, your question, there's a few, like Ed said, you have to really understand yourself, essentially, what matters to you, and that's how I'm translating, Ed, your words. On one side, people, the sage advice, the quintessential kind of like, meme kind of advice is, if you have run out of ideas, that means it's time. But that having ideas in the first place is interconnected with how passionate you really are. I just I just don't like to give up, not because of principle, but because I don't run out of ideas, and then every time I go into one thing and you've adjusted, you're learning more, but you're learning more focused about the same problem than you did when you started. And that learning gives you the opportunity to see and create more value. So it's just I wish there was a way to tell people like, oh, you just have to do this and you get there. But the journey is so fun, that why would you choose any other way to get there?
And I think retrospectively looking at Asteroid now, Asteroid pivoted, right? And that we don't look at that as like a negative. We look at that like that makes you more of an appealing company to invest in, because you're willing to basically take what you've already learned, and then you might be fortunate in that maybe half of your next product is built because of the findings of your previous. You might not have that at all, but you have to be so invested in the idea to the point that you are willing to, you're invested in the successfulness of what your current product is, to the point that you're willing to switch it out if you generally find that there's something better you can do, right? And yeah, I'll repeat, I don't think we don't look back on Asteroid originally pivoting from a different idea to what we do now as a negative. We look at that like, if anything, it's a positive thing that we did, because we wouldn't be where we are now if we hadn't done that.
Sorry, Tom, after you.
Sorry, just to explain that maybe in a sentence, the initial idea was supervision for AI agents. And then we basically sat there going, no one's building AI agents, or okay, maybe we think there are because it's a somewhat small community, but really it's not that many people. And so it would have never taken off. And I suppose, but we took that learning and went, okay, let's build our own.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's there's definitely a sense of if you are sticking it out, and you shouldn't stick it out for the sake of sticking out, but if you're sticking it out, after 4 years, you actually become more valuable, because the biggest reason why startups fail is people give up and teams break up. So if a team sticks together, even if it's and you show progress, right? Different kinds of progress, and you're actively just trying to solve problems and doing things, even if you haven't quite made it, you suddenly become for VCs, very attractive. And that was a very big surprise to me. At 4-year mark, suddenly more people wanted to talk to us because we were still around. From my Stanford Ignite program, we're still the only startup that is going from 8 years ago. Adam, you have another question?
Yeah, I'm happy to let others go first, but sort of for you guys at Asteroid working in the AI application layer, how important is it for you to be focused on AI research and all the papers coming out and that sort of related but parallel world of all of the research being done and architectural stuff? Is that a distraction to you just focusing on building and shipping, or is it important for you as engineers to be paying attention to all that goes on week by week in that space?
I think it's empowerment for us that we're on the right journey here. We build in a way where a new model coming out doesn't make us obsolete, right? We the way we going a bit more technical here, but the way we build our platform is so that you can bring in a new model and then use that model, and then you get all the advantages of all the research. So yes, it can be distracting. Suddenly a new model gets released, let's go and test it. But if anything, it's making our products better. I think and it's very important for us not to over optimize for the current state of AI. it's almost a certainty that models are going to become cheaper, faster, and more intelligent. So let's say we're currently losing money on something. Well, we shouldn't worry about that, because we know that'll be solved by one of the labs, right? And we should worry about the things that we can actually have an impact on, which is building, as you said, the application layer, the infrastructure, to make it more kind of approachable to non-technical people to use these agents. But like, yeah, it's like still just as exciting in the office, hearing about a new lab that's formed, that's working on a particular like domain of agents that is going to like revolutionize the area. Like that's still really exciting, and it's still just as important for us to be aware of. So yeah.
And something that really helps us is we do also have a, I guess, research founding engineer. So we're a team of 5, 2 co-founders, Ed and I, and then Davide, who has joined us recently, and so he's able to run a lot more of the evals and kind of test the new models when they come out and all that kind of thing. So it does take a little bit of pressure off us. Not that we let him do it in isolation, because we're all super interested, but yeah, having someone in that role, I think it's only been a month, but it's been working really well for us.
That's really cool that you guys have that. It's actually, I was also very curious building on this, and I do want Tom to be able to ask his second question. So I'll let Tom ask that question first. Tom?
We can't hear you if you're talking. Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Basically, I put it in the chat already, but I was asking, do you use code gen tools, and what have you found has been best for you when using code gen tools? Like what tool, but also what's the workflow? How do you make sure it like works long term and not just like for a hackathon style of like short lifespan?
I don't know. So I think Ed and I have slightly different workflows for this, so I can explain mine. So I'm a big Claude Code user, and the reason for that is because it's IDE agnostic, and so I can use it in JetBrains IDEs, which I'm a complete shill for. I love them. But yeah, so typical workflow for me would be throw it in plan mode, see what plan it comes up with. If I'm broadly happy with it, let it have a crack. But most importantly, make sure I'm reviewing it. That we had this at my previous place as well, where just because an LLM wrote it, you don't have an excuse. You committed that code, your name is next to it. And so ultimately, using like we use them all the time, right? I use Claude for probably 80-90% of the code I write. But when I push it up to GitHub and it goes for a review, that it's mine, if that makes sense, and I have to take responsibility. But yeah, so that I suppose that's my flow. The typical thing is pretty easy, as I say, plan mode. I do push it around in plan mode a bit and go, I want this implemented in that way. Oh, I want it to follow this pattern. I don't want it to cross this boundary. All kind of things that for code you want to last, you should care about, if that makes sense. I don't know, Ed, if you want to expand a bit more.
Yeah. So I use Cursor, which is kind of the most popular choice right now, but similar kind of workflow. Definitely speccing the prompt as much as possible is hugely important. I think people sometimes overuse like a 1-sentence description to then get it to completely refactor your code base. It's just not going to do. It'll try its best, but it's not going to do a good job. We also use I kind of the best use of like AI tooling I've seen that we use is more the review system. So we run both Cursor and Claude Code on our PRs, and that has caught so many issues that probably we wouldn't have caught naturally at a startup. The idea of like reviewing everyone's code properly is like a lot of companies don't even bother doing that, right? A lot of startups. So sometimes you have a tendency just to hit approve, But now we have like a second pair of eyes that's going like, or two more pairs of eyes because we use two separate models for this, and it picks up on issues all the time. So like I definitely say the kind of the high level view here is that, yeah, we use AI tooling a lot. If anything, it just means we can move faster, but you still, as Tom was saying, is still the kind of you actually have to become a even better engineer, because you have to be able to look at code and critique it, which is often a harder thing to do than writing code itself. So yeah.
Can you elaborate on the process of how you do that? Like, how do you guys, like, how have you brought that like system in for the code check with the two LLMs?
So a lot of the setup's automatic now. You can just go into Cursor, onto your account. You can buy the $40 a month subscription to get it to review all your PRs. Claude is similar. Reviews your PR, and it just sets up automatically on your GitHub PRs, and it will leave comments. They both do it in a slightly different way. Cursor will just output like bugs, whereas Claude will actually do like a full review of like good things. It'll often give you like a 5-star rating at the end on like how mergeable is this code. We find that both of them pick different things up. They sometimes give false positives, but the time to reject a false positive, well, I guess it's the time it takes to reject a bug that's not actually a bug in PR is like minimal, right? And if anything, it gets you to almost critique your code and go like, oh, actually, even though this wasn't correct, there's actually a better way of me doing this. And this might be why the AI struggled to understand what was going on, is because I wrote it in a terrible way. So I think the tooling is really good just to make you think again about how you've implemented something. But yeah, I highly suggest using, I think, is it Code Rabbit is another one that's quite popular. Yeah.
I mean, do people have more questions? I've got a couple more questions. I mean, this is for me, I'm a product guy, so this is kind of like, especially with Claude Code, I'm so empowered right now. But my first question is, do you feel, you mentioned how you have to be an even better developer in order to review and critique code. So on one side, that sounds like it's even more important to learn how to code, because you don't want to have that dependency, and mistakes happen. But on the other side, can you elaborate on how the critiquing process has made you a better developer?
I think it's kind of like,
yeah,
I think it's the classic thing of like positive reinforcement. If you see one way of something being done, it's very easy for you just to agree with how it's been done. Whereas to look at a bit of code, and like it's the reason why big tech companies, your junior developers don't review code or don't approve the final code. They always submit it higher up, and that's because your senior developers have the skill to look at code and go. So I think your core fun understanding of like, we use Golang and TypeScript, and I think your core understanding of how that all works is just as important to be able to critique the code. I think Tom's laptop's died, so he's gonna join me in here.
It has, apologies.
That's a bit of an illusion. Little do you know, we were sat just opposite each other.
Yeah, and I guess the second question I had is, the volume of new tools coming in to help build is really fast. And when you're doing, how often as a team do you decide to reflect on which tools you're using, which new tools you want to bring in versus like technologies?
Yeah, I think it's actually more exciting because like you'd never switch a tool unless it was something that was better about it. So we'll often have a problem that we might be stuck on in terms of like infra or something like front end or back end or whatever it is. And then suddenly we'll be really excited because something's released, or we found something from like watching YouTube or reading articles that'll solve the problem. So we would never just change tooling for the sake of it. We don't want to be rebuilding the same code. The way we operate at Asteroid is, if you're touching a bit of code, make it better, and don't refactor things unless you're like touching it anyway. So like if you're building a new feature that touches like something that is like maybe not directly relevant, but you're gonna have to modify that code. Yeah, go and update it to use the new standard or the new kind of tooling that we should be using. But yeah, like yeah, refactoring for the sake of refactoring is not something we do. But introducing new tools to solve problems we did have is definitely something we do often.
I suppose on the refactoring thing, the reason that works is because we hold each other refactor as you go along. I don't think that would work if we did just throw stuff out every 10 minutes, or throw rubbish out every 10 minutes and not take time when we're working on stuff.
You guys just keep inspiring new questions. Now I'm even thinking of asking, because you've got, these 3-person kind of tech team. Do you think that's the ideal size for a startup, like at this stage, tech team?
To be honest, I think the size of the team has been optimal. Every point I'm like, could we do with someone else? Like, yeah, could we get more work done? But then it's also someone else to introduce to the team. We're still like, we always feel like we're still working on the fundamentals of the company. I think our expectation on like our software that we build though naturally gets higher and higher. But I think for now, at the moment, we've kind of got 3 engineers who are working building stuff. We've got the CTO and the CEO as well. Maybe 1 extra engineer, but I don't think we'd want much more than 1 more engineer, right?
I think we'd need additional product resources probably at that stage. I don't think we're how best to put it, quick enough at coming up with ideas and ways to improve things to be able to support too many more than we've currently got at the moment. And so we need more people. I say more people on the product side, like our product side is all of us kind of, but we probably need a dedicated product person if we had too many more engineers. I couldn't put like a solid number on it though.
Is David leading product right now?
We all kind of are. So David is
cool.
lead account manager. And then the way we've done it is that because the rest of the team is our engineers, basically, we've each got kind of a customer or multiple customers that we look after. So at the moment, I'm some days spending 60-70% of my time servicing those customers. If you've got a product person, so either go to market or kind of a forward deployed engineer, somebody who can take some of that workload off us. But I still think having us being involved with customers, like as part of our responsibility, is still so important. The amount of changes we've done because we got fed up of a way we have to service our customers, and then we've just gone and fixed it. Yeah, I think that's hugely important.
I think it's huge that you guys are involved. And how did you guys decide that that's important? Is it just like you're saying, you got frustrated, you just want to come in, or is this by design? Because how can we get more people on the tech side to engage with customers, so that, because it makes such a big difference?
So I personally don't see a world where you can't, or well, I don't see a world where you are never involved from it, even if you're an engineer at this kind of stage. Even at bigger companies, from everything I've read and my experience, having kind of a customer obsession, so to speak, it is a huge thing. And that there are successful people out there who don't have that and have that kind of wall that Ed was talking about earlier. But I mean, when I joined Asteroid personally, it was already kind of like that, and I don't see a world where it isn't. I don't think we'd be able to fix customers' problems and address their concerns well enough had we not felt their pain and had kind of direct conversations with them. And I must admit, every time I'm on a customer call, there's something else where you're like, oh my God, that's painful, we should fix that.
You want the embarrassing moments with your customers, because you know that this is probably something you've been told verbally over and over again. Oh, there's this weird like path or flow that you do in the UI, something like that, and you're like, yeah, we'll put it in the roadmap. But then until you're actually on a call with a customer and you see them do whatever, you're like, geez, okay, I could have fixed this in 30 minutes. And on every demo, it's been a problem for David, let's say, when he's doing his demos. It's been a problem all this time. And it's kind of embarrassing when you're in that position. And as engineers, we've got the kind of the full stack understanding of the problem and how it can be solved and how long it will take to solve. So we're kind of very advantageous that we can solve problems. If it's an easy thing to solve, we can just do it, right? And that's one of the advantages of being a startup, is that because you're touching base with the customers a lot, you can fully understand their problems and then just fix the problem.
Cool. And we have a question from Hafiz, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then I have a last question, which I just think is just really important for all engineers out there when they're thinking about building, when they haven't really had the startup thing. So I'm going to let Hafiz, do you want to say your question, or do you want me to read it? I'll read it. At what stage do you hire new engineers with equity, salary, or contract?
So yeah, really interestingly, we just hired a new engineer, and to be honest, we weren't necessarily looking at hiring someone new, but the opportunity came around where we find somebody who was like, we kind of knew them a bit before, we meshed very well with them, and we thought they would be a good fit, and then they ended up leaving their company, wanting to join as a founding engineer at another company, and they had the skills. They had proactively gone about doing some research on our platform, running some evals for us, some like security evals, and gave us a report. And that was like, well, if they're doing this work and they're not even officially working for us yet, how would they be? So like, I think we're still like early stage enough that we've got enough people that we've got in mind who might want to join us, that if the opportunity comes around and as soon as we feel like we need more capacity, it's always difficult to predict, will it be worth it? Is it worth the effort of onboarding someone? But we are now thinking, like, when we're moving to San Francisco, hopefully in about a month's time, to kind of build the company out there. And we are now thinking, oh, who are we going to hire when we move out there? And we're talking about, but specifically on the engineer front, I think as soon as you see there's kind of now room for like an extra isolated project to be worked on in parallel, that's when you probably need to hire. At the moment, it feels like we can't really be managing more than 3 parallel projects at the same time because we're still figuring things out with the core infrastructure. But we're getting to the point now where things can be built more in parallel, and therefore you can have 4 or 5 engineers working on separate projects without conflicting too much with each other.
Yeah, I suppose just to expand on the contracting side, ultimately when you get contractors in, you have to, when they go, and they will eventually go, you have to look after what they've built. So like there's situations where it may work. We did look at it for a particular piece of infrastructure and decided against it. But yeah, I guess something to be wary of. I've worked with contractors a lot in previous roles, and to the point where like half the engineering team ended up being contractors at one point, and then they'll go, and then it's like, okay, we probably just needed a bigger engineering team anyway, because we're now spending all our time kind of, just on maintenance of these projects. So yeah, I think especially at early stages, getting people who really want to be there, which typically means proper hires. Having said which, we're both on contracts, but I think that's reasons.
Yeah, but that's neither here or there. That's, I'm sure there's like 100 reasons for that. So my last question, and I think it's really pertinent for the stage you're at and where you've been and where you're going: re-platforming. Could you share a little bit about your opinions on how are you going to re-platform, or are you building so that you don't have to? I feel the reason I ask this question is I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially when they're very, very early stage, which is not quite where you are right now, but perhaps before you came in, the need for re-platforming. Would you mind giving a little bit of a chat about that?
how do you mean by replatforming? Like starting from scratch type thing on?
Well, just so for example, I get asked maybe 20% of the time with people who don't have experience about how. So on the non-engineer side, they're thinking about resource management, right? And on the engineer side, they're thinking about being efficient. So, but when speed is king, you have to accept that you're going to have debt, and you're going to have to replatform. So but it's so much more powerful when it comes from people like yourself, if you agree with that or whatever you would think about it.
I would say in a lot of instances, you would have to. It's how best put it, Asteroid. So we have been through replatforming quite early on, I suppose. Like we binned our initial code base, which was kind of around the time we pivoted, and then started building on what we currently have. I think, to be fair, because of Ed and I's experience in larger companies, and hopefully this doesn't come back to bite us, I wouldn't say like I put my absolute best code out at Asteroid, but it's good enough to understand, and we do kind of try and stay on top of debt nowadays. And thus, I don't see a world where we completely bin what we've got. Some parts may get rewritten, but because we have the kind of refactor as we go along type policy, and I suppose coupled with that, getting a refactor done in the way that you want it with something like Claude Code or Cursor is quicker if you prompt it and you're really strict with it and tell it how you want it to look. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure we would replatform now, or if we will ever. But as we scale, there will be bits of our system is currently like a modular monolith type layout, which will be properly split out. And I suppose, but I think that will be gradual, I'd imagine. And then at some point we'll go, oh, that original repo is not there anymore. I don't think it will be here's a completely new one.
Yeah, I think reiterating what I mentioned earlier is that we've done replatforming. It's kind of a sliding scale on like what is a big enough change, but like we've changed big parts of our code base, but alongside new features. So we released about 6 months ago, pretty much around the time I started, a new graph-based workflow system. So rather than just like one big prompt, you have like nodes in a graph, and the agent will follow that kind of graph. That involved, under the hood, a big replatform, because suddenly you're dealing with discrete sections of the workflow. And at the same time, you improved a bunch of logic there, right, to make it more like plug and play, shoving in different nodes. And that was a replatforming. But I think the advantage there, and a good way of convincing your founders that something's worth doing, is releasing a feature alongside with it. I think there's always this, even at bigger companies, there's always this battle between engineers wanting to make perfect code, use the latest technologies, and products want to push forward with features. If you can just merge those together, so I need to move to this new technology because it will enable us to build this brand new feature much quicker or much better or much cheaper, right? Then it's worth it. I from an engineer, as an engineer, I don't like just doing reformatting for the sake of it or replatforming for the sake of it. Yeah.
There's a quote in the SVPG books that I mentioned earlier, which says all great engineering teams spend between 10 and 30% of their time refactoring permanently, so as they're going along. And now I think that percent will be smaller in a startup for sure, but I think if you're roughly near that, say the lower end of the scale, maybe you're not going to have too many problems. Sorry, that was probably quite a convoluted answer.
No, it's great. I just want people to, it's because you have to understand, we exist to help people get exposure, understanding, access, everyone comes to hear you guys and all the other ones because you guys have this experience, right? And I mean, I remember for whatever it's worth, like I remember caring so much about which code base I was going to use 9 years ago, and then realized within a year later that I really wasted so much time thinking about that. it matters, like you said, when you've got something, it's more stable, it fits in. But when, like, for most of the audience who are going to build a startup, and for those who are still on the call, don't forget to apply to the Oxbridge-AI challenge. But you know, when the idea stage, you just have to go and do it, and then you learn. It's like compounds all the different lessons you've been sharing today. You learn more when you do. When you reach a certain stage, there are all these tools you can also use that helps you. And then when you reach a certain stage, you're at a place where you don't have to worry about this, because the speed happens as a consequence of knowing what to do, right? And until you feel that level of confidence, you just have to keep going.
For sure.
Any final remarks, guys?
No, just thank you very much for having us. It's been we're engineers, so we love talking about like engineering and like how we got to where we are, because we were you guys at some point. So yeah, like been very, very interesting talking about it.
Well, hopefully we'll get you guys back soon. Otherwise, you know, you guys are now our heroes, right? So we're gonna have you guys helping us judge and things. So you know, I'm very excited about that. But I need to jump on a meeting myself, so I'm gonna say goodbye. But thank you again, guys, and happy Diwali to everyone. And don't forget to apply.
Thank you very much. See you all.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.